On today's episode of Repeatable Genius, I'm going to be looking at the growth sprint. This is a technique that was outlined in a video by the company AJ&Smart. AJ&Smart is a design company, and they've partnered with Jake Knapp, the author of one of the original guides to design sprints called Sprint. As a result of this partnership, AJ&Smart has been one of the leading voices in design sprints. And a design sprint is a 4 or 5 day effort where you involve a team from a company and you sit them down and you go through a very clear set of steps intended to drive the team towards a proven, tested prototype so that basically they've created a new product in a week. AJ&Smart is very good at creating this kind of consistent process or implementing a consistent process. And so I was very interested to see them applying it to growth hacking. Growth hacking is when you look at the various levers of growth available to your company. What I like about that is that it appeals to just about any business on earth. It's a very universal concern. If you're not growing, there's always a risk that you will shrink, perhaps to oblivion. So you want to keep those levers of growth going. Growth hacking is a very systematic way of approaching growth. You look at the various levers of growth, and these are acquisition, how one attracts clients in the first place, activation, how you get your new clients to really engage with you, and then there's retention. Retention is, do customers who do business with you stay to do business a second time, a third time, a fourth time? It's often much cheaper to attract an existing client to come back for more than it is to look for new conquests all the time. Then there's revenue. Are you able to generate revenue from your relationship with your customer? And if not, how can you tweak that? And then finally, referral. Do your customers let other customers know that you exist and that you do a good job? Dave McClure originally came up with this list of growth levers or metrics, and he fashioned them under the acronym R, which is short for AARRR. And of course, it's those various steps: the acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, and referral. You got to get. So you got to get their attention. You have to get the customers in the door. You have to get them to stay. You have to get them to pay, and you have to get them to refer other people. So those are the metrics that you're after. And the nice thing about growth hacking, it's very scientific. What you do is you basically come up with an experiment for what it is you hope to achieve. So if you're looking at acquisition, you would say, I think that one of the reasons we're not getting a lot of attention is our website is dull or alienating or doesn't seem to really capture the subject matter. You might suggest if it looks impersonal, then maybe some pictures of people on the page would make a difference. So that would be your hypothesis, that we can make our web page appear more friendly by having pictures of people. What's the expected outcome? That visitors would stay a little longer. You might measure that in terms of extra clicks or how many seconds they stay. And then you would say, okay, so the action we will take is we will add these photos of people to our website and we will measure the difference in terms of clicks or duration of stay. So you have basically a scientific experiment to undergo. And so if you can move that needle, if the end result is that you've got more people to stay on your website, then you have made an improvement to the acquisition part of your pirate metrics. What AJ&Smart and Jake Knapp have done with Design Sprint is to make design thinking more approachable. Design thinking embodies the ideas of you should check in with your users to make sure you're making the right thing. You should make prototypes so that when you explain what it is you think they want, they have something to work with and give you feedback on, and you need to do that iteratively. That's easily understood by most people, but it does beg the question, okay, where do I start? What do I do? What do I do after that? What do I do after that? A design sprint is a very formulaic way of approaching this, and because it's been done so many times in the past, including by companies like Google Ventures, where Jake Knapp is from, you can have faith in that process, you can invest in it, you can make sure the people are there who need to be there and run through the process knowing that your outcome is going to be a new product to try. That same logic is being applied by AJ&Smart in this growth sprint. It's a set of steps that a table of people can take to identify what growth lever to look at in their company, and then fashion experiments, and then go out and then try those experiments, and then come back to the table with the result of those experiments and do the thing over again. It's still iterative, but now it's very straightforward. So I'm going to do a quick run through of AJ&Smart's growth sprint formula, and then I'm going to compare it to what I used working with a group of solopreneurs. Step one of AJ&Smart's growth sprint is asking the question, what's moving us forward? So again, it's this idea that we're all on the same team, we know what the company's doing, what is propelling our success? So they take a sailboat metaphor, and when you're looking for what's propelling us forward, what is filling our sails? What is driving us in the direction we want to go? And so people might come up with examples like, our sales team is doing great, or people are really resonating with our product, or we're getting mentions in the media. These are all good news stories. It turns out that the purpose of doing this of this particular step is really to get good vibes going at the table. It's hard to start just immediately looking at all the problems without knowing that at least something in your company is going well. So you can create good vibes at the table by going through some examples of what is propelling the company. The second step, of course, is the corollary to that. It's saying, what is holding us back? In the sailboat metaphor, it's what is the anchor? What is it we're dragging through the water that's slowing us down? And so you start looking at what the problems are. And again, coming back to these pirate metrics, you can look at, is it acquisition? Is it activation? Is it revenue? What is the big problem that we have? The hope is that the people in the room are sufficiently aware of what's going on in the company that they can identify what the real problems are in terms of the various growth levers, acquisition, retention, etc. Once you have that list of the problems of what's holding the company back assembled, you can put it on the wall, and that takes us to step 3. Once you have this list of problems that everybody at the table has assembled, you want them to reframe them. So don't look at them as problems anymore, look at them as opportunities for improvement. So instead of saying our customers come and they use our product once and they leave, the how might we, the more optimistic way of framing the problem is how might we get customers to stay for more than one visit? So you assemble a series of what they call how might we questions, HMWs, and those are then posted on the wall, and that takes us to step 3. Once you have all the how might we's on the wall, the next step is a dot vote. I talked about dot votes in a previous video, I'll put in the show notes, but the premise is quite simple. Everybody gets a handful of dots, maybe 2, maybe 3, and they're asked to put a dot on the how might we on the wall that strikes them as being either the most important or the one that should be worked on first. It's the thing that really resonates with them. At the end of the dot vote, you want to rank all the how might we's. So you reassemble the post-it notes with the highest dots at the top and the lowest number of dots, the 1s and the 0 dots, you just take them out of the pile altogether. So you wind up with a list of the highest voted items, below that the next highest, below that the next highest. Depending on how ruthlessly you discard post-it notes, you'll probably wind up with about 6 how might we's left on the wall at that point. Step 4 is the lightning demo. So this is when you ask people to devote some time either thinking in their head or using their phone to look for examples, trying to come up with potential solutions to all of the how might we's that are left on the wall. After about 15 minutes or so, they will have completed coming up with their ideas, and they're given 2 or 3 minutes each to go through those ideas for the benefit of the rest of the team. The goal here is to release the creative energy on the team. Not only have they had a chance to do some research and a little bit of reflection on the problems, they've also had the benefit of everybody else's thoughts. So theoretically, they'll be able to come up with even better ideas now. Step 5 in the AJ&Smart method is to define experiments. So this is when you're getting really close to the point when you're going to actually implement some solutions, or at least what you hope to be solutions, but they're going to be very empirical. You're going to be able to measure the outcome of the efforts you make. At the end of step 4, we wound up with about 6 how might we's, and the participants might have a new experiment defined for 3 of those how might we's. So you're going to wind up with, let's say you have 6 people at the table, 3 experiments each, you're going to wind up with 18 experiments. Each one of these experiments is going to have a consistent format. It's going to have a name. That's going to make it easier to rank them later on and refer to them in discussion. It's going to have a hypothesis or a theory. The theory is, I think that we should try this because I think it will have this impact. The reason you document this is that you may discover that the opposite is true or that it has no impact, but at least now you've tried it. And so you can either put that hypothesis to bed or you can double down on it later on. The next component of a growth experiment is the actual action you intend to take. So you put explicitly, we should change the website this way, or we should change the way we do lineups in our store this way, or we should change our advertising that way. What is it you expect to have done? What is the measure you want to take? And then after that, you have the last part, and this is an important part, it's success criteria. What does it look like when you're succeeding? If you take this step, your hypothesis says we will succeed by having this outcome. So again, it could be traffic on your website, it could be how long people stay in your store, it could be any one of a number of things, but you're going to document all of that so that when you run your experiment, you have a baseline to compare to. The final step in the AJ&Smart method, step 6, is a couple of votes. So the first vote, everybody gets a sticker and they put their initials on it and they indicate which experiments they would most like to participate in. Then the experiments that have no votes or maybe only 1 vote, they get discarded, and so now you're back to a smaller set. You take that set and then as a group you decide, are these difficult? So do they require huge changes to the organization or big investments of money and time? Or are they simple, in which case you could implement them right away? And then you look at how much impact you expect them to have. So you wind up ranking them. The typical way is to rank it in terms of difficulty. So you would have difficulty this way, and then you would have impact this way. I tend to go the opposite on the x-axis. I like to identify ease, because then the easier it is, the farther out it is on the x-axis. And we're accustomed to having something in this quadrant being easy and high impact. This quadrant tends to be where the good news is, and this just makes it more intuitive. So I have the y-axis be how much impact we anticipate, and then the x-axis, the bottom, being how easy it's going to be as opposed to how hard. And so then you wind up with a list up in this corner that the group agrees on. Now you may have some difficulty getting the group to agree. That's why one of the participants at any one of these sprint type meetings is going to be a decider, somebody who holds the purse strings or some sway over what the group does. They, in a pinch, can tie break and say, no, this is the quadrant it belongs in. It's important not to get too bent out of shape at this point, because this is an iterative process. These are experiments, after all. If the decider says it belongs in this quadrant, and then you run your experiment and it turns out to be wrong, now next time the group is smarter. The group has more wisdom based on the experiments it's conducted before. So don't get too bent out of shape. Maybe the team's going to be right the first time. More than likely, they'll be right the second time. The duration of these experiments is typically about a month, but you can imagine a team getting together every month or even more frequently, because you might want to have a rolling cycle of these experiments going on that may take a month to return results, but you want to come up with new ideas every week. Whether it's every week or every month, you can imagine you're going to come up with an awful lot of experiments to try. Keeping track of these is important because, as I said before, you may find that your hypotheses are proven incorrect. You want to remember that. You can rely on the people at the table to remember that, but it's always good to have a tool. AJ&Smart, they say they use Google Sheets. Sean Ellis came up with the term growth hacking. His company, called growthhackers.com, sells a product called North Star. That is a software package that is built to track all these growth hacking experiments. So that's another way to keep track of things. But no matter how you do it, whether it's having the team focused and remembering everything or an online tool, you want to keep track of your experiments because you're going to be doing this forever and you want to be able to refer back to what worked and what didn't. So I recently conducted a growth sprint workshop and I had to rearrange it a little bit from the AJ&Smart model because everybody at the table was a solopreneur, was either a side hustle or a small business. We weren't all on the same team. And so we weren't all looking at the same growth levers. So I modified it quite a bit so that everybody would leave the table with actionable ideas for them to do. Step one, because we were all unfamiliar with each other's businesses, was each person in turn going through what their business is, who they serve, what pain points they're trying to address, what value looks like for their customers, and what the problems are they're having with the various growth levers. Then in step two, we all took some time together alone to write out how might we's for our own businesses. Then in step two, I asked each participant to write out how might we statements for their businesses. One how might we statement for each growth lever. So one for acquisition, one for activation, etc. So 5 Post-its from each participant. And then we put them on the wall. Each person would put their own in a row, and then the next person would put one in a row below. And so we wound up with 6 rows and 5 columns, one for each growth lever and 1 row for each person at the table. Then we all got 6 stickers each, and we were to vote on each row. So for each person, including ourselves, where did we think the how might we statement regarding a growth lever most needed attention? As it turns out in this group, there was quite a bit of consensus. The how might we statement for each person that got the most votes got the vast majority of the votes. So it was pretty clear what we needed to work on. Nevertheless, in retrospect, I think I would have consolidated some of these steps, and I would have said for each person to tell each other what their business is about and who their customer is, and also in the same step outline what the growth lever they're having the most trouble with, and framing that as a how might we, so that we can get started on creating solutions to that right away. I think in retrospect we spent an awful lot of time voting for each other's growth levers when probably everybody who came to the table already had a clear sense of what they needed to work on. So that, although it was bonding and it gave us all information about each other's thinking and the problems we faced, I think that time could have been spent better elsewhere. So in retrospect, if I was doing this again, I'd make that part of step one, that the individual business owner would say, and this is the growth lever I want to focus on, and my how might we question is this, so that we bring that question to each other and we can work on it together. Step 4 was lightning demos. So just like in the original AJ&Smart growth sprint, it was some time to work together alone to think about the ideas that have already come up in our heads, or do some research online using our phones, trying to address the how might we's for each other. So unlike the original method where we're all on one company, we're all on one team, this was about accepting and giving the generosity of our own creative ideas. Once everybody had assembled their ideas, we then took turns listening to each other's ideas about our own businesses. At this step, I didn't say to anybody that you had to take notes or write anything down. This was really just a matter of getting everybody to have their say, to put their creativity on the table, and hopefully inspire what came next. Step 5 was defining the experiments. So we had all heard each other's ideas, and now we were going to try and focus producing at least one experiment for each of the other businesses at the table. So taking me as an example, I was one of the participants. I was also facilitating, but I was participating. I would come up with an experiment for all the other 5 people at the table, one each. And the growth experiment, just like in the original AJ&Smart method, has a title, it has a hypothesis, it has an action, and it has success metrics. We then took turns revealing the experiments that we had found to each other. So one person would hear all the other 5 people share the experiments intended for their business. I had intended to leave time at the end. We ran out of time, and this is one of the reasons I'm rethinking steps 2 and 3. We ran out of time to rank all the experiments that had come to light. I'm not sure if I would even devote time to that necessarily. Maybe I would devote more time to discussion, but the fact is that each participant got 5 actionable experiments. I think it's up to them to rank them. I, for one, found the process quite useful. It did produce ideas for my business. One of the participants at the table said we should do this every month. It should be something that we can keep each other accountable on. I think at the very least it would be interesting to see, did people actually pursue the experiments? If not, then we should discuss that. Maybe the process for identifying the experiments can be finessed so that there's more likelihood that people will pursue the ideas. Maybe using the time we save by not doing steps 2 and 3, we can apply to a ranking exercise so that we can get the wisdom of the room applied to finding not only an experiment worth doing, but an experiment that might actually be easy to do. And so anyway, it remains to be seen what will happen in a month. When we get together, we'll see how far people have come. And I'm hoping that by doing this on a regular basis, we'll not only learn from what works in our own business, but we'll learn from what works in each other's businesses as well. I hope you found this interesting. If you did, please click like. And if you'd like to see more of these repeatable genius videos, please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for joining me. See you next time.